Hi, and welcome to CHS Health Technology and Equity Virtual Summit. I'm Chad Stecher, an assistant professor in the College of Health Solutions, and I'll be moderating this session that's titled Passive Monitoring via Smartphones and Implants. I'd like to start off by introducing today's speaker, Katina, who's a professor in the School of Computing and Augmented Intelligence, a senior global futures scientist, director of the Society Policy Engineering Collective, and a professor with the School for the Future of Innovation in Society. You can read Katina's full bio on the left side of the screen by selecting the Speakers tab. Before we dive in, a few housekeeping notes. Please explore the tabs on the left to chat with other attendees and submit questions in the Q&A tab for speakers to answer at the end of the presentation. You can submit your questions at any time throughout the presentation. If you have any audio or video issues, please refresh your browser. This session is being recorded, so you'll also have the ability to log in and watch it on demand at your convenience anytime after the live broadcast. Now let's get started. Welcome to our speaker, Katina. Please take it away.
Thank you so much, Chad, and welcome to everyone in the audience. As Chad said, I'm from the School for the Future of Innovation in Society, and boy, isn't this one of those kinds of presentations peering into the future, but also into the present. This presentation is titled Passive Monitoring via Smartphones and Implants, and we will definitely navigate more so towards the emergent technologies of smartphones and even things like smartwatches here. I do run my own centre, the Society Policy Engineering Collective, SPEC, an interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary centre with very diverse skill sets, and you'll see those disciplines coming together today. I'm also a long-term member of the IEEE Society on the Social Implications of Technology, SSIT, an organisation that has two flagship journals, one of which I'm editor-in-chief of, the IEEE Transactions on Technology and Society. And these are some of the issues we'll be talking today pertaining to the area of health predominantly. A brief outline will be understanding what black boxes are, how black boxes record and report on everything they surveil and everything they monitor and track. We'll be looking into three operational scenarios: in-body, on-body, and external. Think about in-body with respect to implants, on-body, wearable technology such as smartwatches, and external, things that we lug around like smartphones. I'll then introduce you to the concept of übervalence and the antecedents of this novel concept that my husband MG Michael coined in 2006, and predominantly look at übervalence in the context of care and control. We'll be looking at social implications, both unanticipated and unintended, but also peering into the benefits of this kind of technology. First, a brief introduction from a published paper on how we might perceive black boxes in the body, or perhaps in our smartphones and smartwatches. The first type is to look at it as an algorithmic mystery, a product or process that is patented to protect the company's intellectual property and market advantage. It follows that the company's code for that given product or process is dark and not transparent to competitors or the general public. Think about it as an algorithmic mystery, that which is code perhaps within a device, but also a process that may be unique to an individual organization. But we also have a type 2 black box, one that is embedded in the body for surveillance and for monitoring. And these types of black boxes are akin to those that you see in airlines or know of in airlines, a black box that comes in two parts usually. And that technology, if we look at the flight recorder, has a flight data recorder that comes in the form of an embedded microchip implant tethered to a smartphone. So if we use that metaphor, we extend the flight data recorder into an implantable or a smartphone that collects the same kinds of data from the field, but also from inside your body, perhaps vital signs and characteristics. So here's the metaphor. On the left-hand side, you can see what an FDR looks like, a flight recorder from an airline. And on the right-hand side, a potential black box within the human body, one that is able to provide identity, your location, and more importantly, in this presentation, your condition. Uh, Smartphones, for example, and implantables may be tethered together to offer data such as that generated from different types of chipsets, like a gyroscope, a magnetometer, an altimeter, that basically shows which direction you're walking in, where you are on the Earth's surface, whether you're going up or downstairs, and whether or not you are stationary or your palms may well be sweaty or your temperature has risen. And these are the kinds of passive health monitoring techniques we're now seeing, even through devices such as this Samsung smartwatch that has just come out, which allows you to do everything you did with a step counter and more. But what could that tell us about ourselves? And most of the time, we do consider the quantified self movement in context to the gathering of this data to allow us to benchmark ourselves against other healthy people or know when something is wrong and be able to predetermine a condition and preempt that something might happen to us. So if I take the flight recorder, you can see here a bird's eye view from the sky above the clouds, and you're descending, and you keep going with greater visibility until you land the airplane. And that flight data that is being recorded can be then taken away and analyzed for any exception reporting or any kinds of fault tolerance issues that may persist. So let's take that metaphor a little bit further. And here we see a black box for insurance purposes within a vehicle. And vehicular black boxes now monitor what happens at a time of a car crash and many other scenarios, routes, speed, time, distance, acceleration, and any number of incidences to do with crashes or bumping into objects. And so if you take one of these black box insurance car devices on board, your insurance may well be lowered based on your style of driving and also other things which may require investigation to do with the vehicle itself and its condition. So you can see we have these black boxes in aeroplanes, we have these black boxes in cars. And just like in a flight recorder in an aeroplane, albeit somewhat more simple, the black box will record where, when, and most importantly, how one drives. And you know, sometimes parents want to keep tabs on their kids. Sometimes insurance companies may well perhaps in the future say to us, we could lower your health insurance, costs if you show us through wearable technology or implantable technology or passive health monitoring technology on your smartphone. And that is a sign and a way of the future that we should welcome as it is definitely being touted as the next phase of our health profiling. But let's now look at the black box within the house. Many of us now have Nest devices or other types of devices that are hub devices that allow different IoT interactions, whether it's with our lighting, our room temperature, sound and music emanating from different rooms. And again, this smartphone dashboard that can monitor the health of your home or monitor the mood of your home. Many devices now can listen in and perhaps even tell us whether we have a peaceful household or whether our household is quite noisy or it oscillates over time. So you can see again the metaphor being continued until perhaps we get down to that lowest common denominator, the body area network. And here is an older Renaissance kind of visual which shows different form factors onto the human body. So we talked about the flight recorder in the aeroplane, the car recorder in the black box in the vehicle, the hub in the home. But what about the hub in the human being? And this metaphor is continued. Some people have postulated there'll be an access gateway point towards the tummy area, but then we may have wearables externally facing and sensing characteristics within our body, and then an implantable device for a variety of reasons, perhaps in the future, even drug delivery. We don't know what the future prospects might be, but the scenarios are endless. I would just add one technology that is missing from this diagram, and that is the great old smartphone device here that will pretty much determine the capacity and what types of data are being collected, especially when the data is not going to the cloud, but the data may well be going simply to the smartphone, or in some cases simply to a wearable device like this form factor of a smartwatch. So on the next slide, there's been a great deal of speculation about what various companies, proprietary in nature, may own in terms of data emanating from a human being. And this visual was created by Scott Galloway of New York University from memory, that looks at 3 or 4 major companies: Google, Facebook, Amazon, and Apple, and the way in which they perhaps have embraced consumers. Facebook, of course, in romance and the heart. Google, the third half of your brain, as has been written in the literature. Amazon, your gut and your appetite for whatever you want to purchase at an on-demand capability. And Apple, everything else, perhaps. This is just a way to start looking at the human body in different ways. It was not long before, about a decade ago exactly, in 2013, that Autodesk started to look at trials. And this is a real implant in a human being. I've transposed the actual implantable device that carried a speaker, LED, vibration motor, a tap sensor, a tactile button, and a pressure sensor that someone could actually hold up a forearm and start to type and interact with different parts of the implantable, knowing where it was on the forearm. Incidentally, the forearm has become the most mobile location that one can hold up and literally interact with the reader device if required to demonstrate something more mobile. Early patents of implantables were in the, I'm going to show the right tricep here. And this tricep basically was where the implant location was, until people realized that they couldn't actually wiggle around to show and interact with a reader on a wall that was fixed, for example. So here we see this ubervalence perspective, this implantable. We can go from surveillance in flight recorders to data valence, which captures data, to surveillance, monitoring and recording an activity that you are a part of, to this sensor view of ubervalence. So going from the satellite view to the street view to the person view, now right down to that lowest common denominator, the last mile, the sensor view in the human being. And we've, dubbed that the eye plant in jest in terms of the iPhone and the comparator, but the eye plant device within the human body. So that covers the first part of the presentation. And now we're going to look at a case study on a real application that I helped develop here in Australia in 2017. In fact, I was the privacy ambassador for the technology. The technology itself is an application you can find online. It's titled antisocial.io. And the company that built this technology is Zafty Intelligence. And this was predominantly used to help people who were addicted to smartphones, addicted to applications such as social media and Facebook, and addicted to more such as online gambling and gaming through their smartphone device. And what it was supposed to do was actually not cease activity of an individual, but allow an individual to take control and understand their user behavior on a smartphone, in apps, and with broader implications for usage. We could call this a digital nutrition rather than a digital detox, but you can, as a user, set limits on what you are doing and how you are interacting. And you're welcome to visit that YouTube link to look at a demo of Zafty's antisocial.io that has been applied to different areas such as mental health monitoring and more. So here is the website link of Zafty. I'd love for you to visit this passive health monitoring application and company. And it talks about behavioral intelligence in a way that can provide passive health monitoring. In fact, many of our internal intrinsic behaviors are now being externalized through our mobile phones that may well be able to capture periods of depression, periods of outage, periods of high interaction, depending on the applications we're viewing. For example, we may be going through a traumatic event. We may be searching for more information constantly online and looking for advice. But we also may be going through other kinds of experiences and perhaps tending to certain applications, whether those are dating applications or applications towards gaming or gambling or any number of applications. But these kinds of excessive uses to your own patterns of behavior may be considered outliers, and early intervention strategies may well be instituted and alerting you to your usage patterns before you are even aware that you are perhaps falling into a rut, or perhaps spending too much money online and going broke, and many other things. So you can set kinds of targets and start to become more aware of your behavior and alter your behavior based on states that you require to be healthy and living well. So it is what we believe groundbreaking technology. There are many different partners which you can visit there on the website. But pretty much mental health, even oncology treatment to support people going through cancer. The software is available for clinical trials, and people can second Zafty Intelligence to, use additional data points beyond those that it gathers, and with simple reporting, and that can help identify a user, locate a user, and look at their condition, as well as any number of other factors from the field that need to be collected. But on the right hand, you can see that example application for problem gamblers, which would be great to have in a way to monitor people's use and to redress their gambling behaviors if it's excessive. The kinds of data that Zafty collects are things that you'll find on your S-Health, Samsung Health device, whether it's a smartphone or smartwatch. Things like a heart rate, biometric data from the field, and your body, I should say, your skin temperature, variability, your breathing rate, sleep patterns, and perhaps even during times of stress, you may be, if these kinds of applications are tethered or they're coming in a form factor of a smartwatch, you may be asked by the smartwatch to start breathing in, inhaling and exhaling perhaps 6 times per minute, just getting more oxygen into the body, or going for a walk just to clear the head. It does keep track of exercise, just like Samsung Health and many other applications on the iPhone. And what you might see here is different types of exercises being predicted based on your style and your movement data and speed, distance, time data. Importantly, the basic fundamental thing we were looking at when Antisocial.io was launched in 2017 was becoming more aware of screen time, but also different types of things like communications and social media. But you can see that Zafty provides an intelligent dashboard there in the middle, which you can basically see a snapshot of yourself. But also, apart from an individual dashboard, you could possibly even link to a together dashboard. That's what different kinds of applications like Samsung Health call them. And the together dashboard allows you to benchmark against other people, your age and context, allowing you to see whether you are actually doing sort of similar to most of society. Not that normalized behavior is what we should follow, but we have even seen a redress in the number of steps, which were once recommended as 9,000 and now have come back to typical 5,000 to 6,000 steps, interestingly enough, in the literature. So on the right, your dashboard on your smartphone to give you a quick snapshot of number of steps, your heart rate, your average stress, and other notes there that you can see. But from an operational scenario now, if we move on to the many different devices that we have seen emergent in the market, even things like smart ring devices that can monitor the same things as smartwatches, but perhaps not display them, but can be tethered to other kinds of form factors. Let's go to some examples of these operational scenarios of in-body, on-body, and out-of-body. So within the human-centric on the body, or machine to human, out of the body to the body, or out of the body externally to an on-body device. Let's now see that in play. So we have all these devices perhaps out in the external environment. We may access them using different types of network technology. We may wear different devices. In this case, you can see a Muse headband, a wearable, flexible electronic there, and other devices on sleeves or on wrists that are external, or wristwatches or smartwatches. And then perhaps implantable devices, which is that in-body device. And you can see various capabilities here, whether it's to do with having an implantable device that is doing something functional to your health, such as a deep brain stimulator or an internal device, such as an insulin pump or a cochlear implant. These are for health reasons, but then you may be also incorporating technology for access control, security, e-payment, and interactive experiences. So this one shows an individual perhaps going past a lamppost that is ambient. That lamppost could recognize all the form factors that you're carrying, perhaps an on-body device, in-body device, or external device to the lamppost. I then might be looking at this kind of environment where I'm wearing wearable sensors and interacting with an external device. This is another operational scenario. And in addition to that, perhaps an implantable device interacting with a smartphone. And this Vivo Key was launched sometime around 2020. And, the power of the smartphone allows you to identify and authenticate, and then to go about the applications on demand on your smartphone or smartwatch or Ring device. But in actual fact, what we're talking about is many-to-many devices, independent of their form factor, independent of what we will be carrying, but increasingly we'll be carrying less luggable devices and more wearable or invisible implantable devices. And this term ubervalence, which has now reached the Macquarie Dictionary, as well as the Oxford Reference Law Dictionary back in 2008, allows us to look at ubervalence as an omnipresent electronic surveillance facilitated by technology that makes it possible to embed surveillance devices in the human body, taking that black box and bringing it into the human. Now, it demonstrates to us, apart from the ubiquity and the pervasiveness, that a device is not always only with you, but always on, and you are ambient on the grid when your devices are triggerable. This kind of technology, as far back as 2014, so 9 years ago, was being touted as a potential for a market itself for health monitoring. So right now we are talking about the smartwatches and the smartphones, but what if one of these devices were implanted in every single human being? This is the size of a AAA battery, if not smaller, and Medtronic were touting this Reveal Link device as a manner in which to become a black box recorder in the human for passive health monitoring that could be preemptive and could be diagnostic to allow people to understand their different contexts. Now, one of the real-world case studies I've been a part of on the ELSI panel, the Ethics, Legal and Social Implications panel for DARPA, is the Adapter project. And Adapter is one of these technologies that we began to research about 2 years ago and look at the ethical implications and social and legal implications when we considered a travel adapter for the human body. Now, what does this mean? It's an adapter that may be able to assist a soldier on deployment with shift lag and jet lag and traveler's diarrhea. These are the three main application areas that DARPA has been exploring with an on-body device, a wearable, and also intersecting and tethering to an implantable within the tricep area. The form factor looks something like this. It would be tethered to a programmer, which is pretty much a mobile phone, and you would be able to see your different patterns of synchronicity and asynchronicity over time. And you may be entraining your implant to allow for the right biochemicals to be dispersed in the body, to sense different types of bacteria that may have entered the body, and a cellular factory that emits different kinds of antidotes when one is traveling between time zones to reduce the amount of jet lag, which is what plagues individuals as they travel. Now, the different kinds of en-tray implant devices here with the internal cellular factories are demonstrated to emit different peptides and therapies within the body. And this device keeps the cellular factories tightly enclosed and only to be diffused into the body on a needs basis, which is to be controlled from an external hub device. This wearable device interacts with the implantable, as you can see here on the left, and triggers the cellular production of therapy. And the mobile device is that which controls the programmer to support shift work and time zone changes as desired, but also if one is suffering from traveler's diarrhea. Now, as promised, the social, technical, legal, and ethical implications here in this fairly closed system, which is somewhere between a closed system just for soldiers in the army and those who have been deployed, potentially, if this is viable in the coming year or years, once it's been diffused, and if it is diffused. But you can see the different kinds of implications here, and the movement of soldiers between closed systems and open systems when they are away from their deployment and from their service during family time. How may that implant be accessed and be used by the individual or by others and interact or be interfered with in external environments? These are all questions we are asking ourselves on soldier rights, on the rights of individuals, on the legalities of this within the armed forces, but also more externally in the public-facing sphere, and what are the ethics and social questions around this. So I hope I've done a quick introduction here of the potential for health monitoring, especially passive health monitoring, whether it's mental or physical, and also on different kinds of scenarios, operational scenarios and case studies, even that which I demonstrated here at the end fairly quickly through DARPA's Adapter project. How connected do we really want to be? Yes, there are many privacy, security, ethics, and human rights questions and more. And what about the last mile in the future? What about how consumers may respond to technology such as this? What are we seeing through various adoption of plain old digital smartwatches? And what might that mean for us carrying many different multiple devices in the future? Will we see the rise of a dependent band body area network? And what are the consequences of hypervalence when we look at the algorithmic mystery? Along with black boxes, they may well be doing different things in the body if we look at the future of nanotechnology. What might this mean in terms of connectedness for insurance purposes and even for other purposes with regards to electromagnetic interference of these devices on the body or in the body? And what about social inclusion and equity? Can these implants be afforded by all people? These technologies to support health, and what action do we take when we identify, is this data that is only available to the individual, or would this be communicated to other health networks or doctors of the individual? We start to look into bodily integrity laws, whether the human is actively in the loop and consent has been granted in different scenarios. But all of these questions are a minefield, and I hope I've done a good job of introducing you to those and made you think about the future in different contexts. I'd like to thank you. If you'd like to get in contact for any reason, I can be emailed at katina.michael@asu.edu. And Chad, I think we now have some time for questions.
Yeah, no, thank you for that presentation. So we're going to move to the Q&A. And just a reminder for audience members, please submit your questions using the Q&A tab on the left of your screen. We have a question here about option for a health profession that might integrate data with practice. So the question goes, it feels like we're missing a health profession, people with clinical training, but are also trained to read and interpret digital wearable data. So many of us have much more digital health information than we are knowledgeable about interpreting, and few physicians seem to do this. Do you think this might be a viable health profession in the future?
Yes, I actually do, and I love this question. It's very insightful, and we've proposed these kinds of things even to SkySong about 4 or 5 years ago, and we don't know. There could be somebody who may be a social worker that may require access to this kind of data. So somebody to be able to collect the data in an informed consent fashion that is abiding by HIPAA if required, and if this is the hope of the patient or the individual consumer, because you don't have to be a patient. I think we'll start to see these kinds of things within the light of consumers. But interpreting the data is a great issue at the moment. We saw the same thing with DNA evidence in courts of law. We also saw the same thing with telecommunications records subpoenaed for warrants and warrant less tracking, for example. But And GPS data is also akin to DNA data in a court of law. So increasingly, even if we don't look at the courts, we are seeing a shortcoming where these clinicians require the ability to look at dashboards and make sense of them. And I think that is a great future prospect for a type of role that is emergent. So a data specialist in a clinical setting that may well be able to interpret the data statistically, but also from a medical perspective, and whether they're going to be our future doctors who are trained in data science or a specialist role is yet to be determined. But I think over time, consumers will also become exposed to the types of data being collected about them. I think the first stage is even awareness of individuals knowing what is going on there. So what a great question that is. Thank you for that from the audience.
Yeah, I have one more. We're going to squeeze in with the time we have left. You mentioned the use of these black box wearables and Uber surveillance by health insurance companies to potentially lower costs for individuals that are performing behaviors that the insurance company wants to encourage. And I wonder what your perspective is on the use of that approach in terms of ethics and data safety, privacy. This seems like something that's sort of knocking on the door, and I'm wondering what your concerns might be about that technology.
That's another great question. I mean, there are many concerns. I'm in this to explore the concerns more than touting the technology for its potential. We are seeing a lot of data being gathered for medical and health purposes, but being used in legal settings. So retrospective use, function and scope creep, for example, are very prominent in this space. We've even had heart pacemakers being used as evidence by asking cardiologists to assess a given scenario that has actually occurred, and data being taken from the pacemaker, and so in some contexts, individuals being charged with arson as a result of the data that's been collected passively on pacemakers. So we think they're health monitoring devices, but of course, if the data is available, it can be subpoenaed and evidence can be gathered to predict or assert behaviors. And what we say with uberveillance, although it is for care, convenience, and control, the underlying factor is control. And these technologies will be used in a way that people did not think they would be. But I think we need to explore at the same time the potential benefits of the technology, understand the risks more clearly, and talk about individual rights. And most of us would probably think about an implantable of this nature for non-medical purposes, not for deep brain stimulation and not for the cochlear implant and not for an insulin pump, and probably raise our eyebrows and say that technology is coming too close to our body. But in 100 years' time, we may see people thinking this is the way of the future and the way to live longer and better with a better quality of life, because early detection often does allow someone to treat a health crisis before it has become full-blown, and whether this is nanotechnology devices in the body that will identify cancer cells early. Some people have pondered about 20,000 nanobots being released into the body, as opposed to these individual identity or location chips that tell us different things tethered to our smartphone. But then this future may be one where we welcome these devices in the longer term, but in the shorter term, I think people will still have this irky reaction and yuck reaction to these devices, though increasingly we will see early movers and early adopters demand the technology for health and other scenarios to do with almost like a 24/7 alibi. This data is being collected. I haven't done anything wrong. And yes, it's my health monitoring device and application, but have a look. I could not have been in this location because my sensors identify that I haven't been. And they're not transferable implants. They're permanent. They can be removed, of course. It becomes tricky over a certain period of time, say 5 years, where different types of tissue and bodily substances start to wrap around an implantable device. It becomes harder and harder over time to remove these devices, though not impossible. So it is a minefield. I put it out there more so because we now have applications on smartphones to do health monitoring, but many people are saying get closer to the body, get more precise with the vital signs and characteristics, and you get better reads. But it's an ethical minefield, Chad. Great question from the audience.
Yeah, well, thank you very much again for the presentation and for answering these questions. We weren't able to get to all of them, but want to thank you again and thank all of the audience for joining. A recorded version of this webinar will be available within 24 hours. You may now close the window. Be sure to check out our other presentations today in the main presentation hall. You can also explore our virtual topic rooms and submit a collaboration request form through the main event navigation if you'd like to connect with a faculty member or presenter. Thank you.